Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Good evening, folks at home. It's our last meeting of March 30th, regular council meeting. We have all members of council here, and the mayor is joining us from our own place. We won't say where. I'd like us to begin by acknowledging that we gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today we gather with the intent, followed by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. The meeting has been called to order. Council, you have an agenda in front of you. What you wish?
Pardon me, Deputy Mayor. With consensus from council, I'd move that the item 6.3 staff report to the council policy amendment be deferred to the referred to the policy and planning meeting on the 24th of April. And with that edit, I'd move that the agenda be accepted.
I will second that, Councillor Wilson.
I would second, but I'd like another edit, please. Just to add one point to council items number be 7.4, a notice of motion for me.
Thank you. Mover agrees to
Yeah,
that?
fully. Fair enough.
On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 2.1, special meeting of February 23rd, 2023. Minutes.
Deputy, I'd move that the minutes of the special meeting be accepted as edited.
Yeah, we have a seconder. Do you need to clarify the amendment?
I have the amendment.
Yeah, I believe it's in good order, Deputy Mayor.
On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. 2.2, regular meeting minutes of March 9th. Councillor Wilson,
I move to be accepted as presented.
seconded by Councillor Calvo.
I'll second the motion, but with a small amendment for the minutes, which is to spell out the full name of RELC,
Okay.
the Riverport Electric Light Commission.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Yeah. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to presentations. We have a presentation from Food Cycle Science by Jacob Hanlon. Is he here with us? Fantastic.
Yes, I am here.
Yeah. Welcome, Jacob. And I'll hand it over to you. Maybe just before I do that, I don't know if staff have had a conversation about the length of time of the presentation and all that.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Fair enough. Over to you.
Thank you. I've become a regular at these presentations, so yeah, but I appreciate it. I'm just going to share my screen here.
Super.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to start by saying good evening, Mayor and members of council and staff. I just want to thank you for having me on this evening. I'm Jacob Hanlon, and I'm the Municipal Program Coordinator at Food Cycle Science, and I'm really excited to discuss a food waste diversion program opportunity with your town here. So I'm going to go over a decent amount of information here in a short amount of time, so I just ask that you bear with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions after the presentation. So I'll just start by briefly speaking about who we are. Food Cycle Science is a Canadian company, and we're based out of Ottawa. And we're 100% focused on food waste diversion solutions. We primarily do this using our innovative technology called the Food Cycler. And it's an in-home food recycler that is sold direct to consumers through partners like Vitamix and Breville, to classrooms through our not-for-profit organizations and partners, and then to municipalities as well through our Food Cycler municipal solutions. So our municipal solutions help many small, rural, remote, and northern communities keep food waste out of their landfills. We're currently working with 73 Canadian municipalities across 7 provinces and territories, from Nelson in British Columbia to Hay River in the Northwest Territories, and then many communities in Ontario and Quebec as well. And we're really making a push now to spread our awareness out in Eastern Canada. So just to quickly go over the problem, thing that we're trying to address here is that food waste is avoidable and it accounts for a large portion of our household waste, sometimes even a majority. And more importantly, it's mostly made up of liquid, which is heavy and freezes in the wintertime. And then on top of that, when food waste ends up in the landfill, it's responsible for generating harmful greenhouse gases. And all these factors make it so that food waste is a problem that has a strong municipal impact. So one of the impacts to municipalities is that since food waste makes up such a large portion of our waste stream, it is causing our landfills to fill up quickly. Operating a landfill is costly for a municipality, and we obviously want to extend the lifespan of our landfills for as long as possible. The environmental impact is that when organic waste is in the landfill, it produces methane gas, which is quite a bit more harmful than CO2. And to put that into perspective, taking 1 ton of food waste out of the waste stream is the equivalent to taking 1 car off the road for an entire year. And then in our communities, putting food waste in the garbage causes odors, which is unpleasant for humans, of course, but it does attract animals like bears and raccoons and different animals that love to go through our trash. So removing food waste from the garbage eliminates these issues, and it reduces the overall volume of the waste that has to go into the landfill. So this can save the town on any kind of hauling and disposal fees, definitely can save space in the landfill, and it can save residents on some hassle and on any excess waste fees that they might face. So we often get asked, haven't we solved this problem already? And there are green bins, which are common in big cities with high population densities and the right infrastructure. However, this can be cost prohibitive to many other communities, as it can be operationally challenging and difficult to implement. Many people in your community might backyard compost, and we think that although this is a great solution, it's not for everybody. It's certainly not feasible year round, and there's still the concern about different animals and pests that might want to get into these backyard bins. So then finally, the easiest solution is we can continue to landfill our organic waste, but the long-term impacts here are costly and harmful to the environment. So at Food Cycler, what we've done is proposed a different way to deal with our food waste. And this really focuses on making food waste really easy to deal with and right in our homes. So essentially, we built a small kitchen appliance about the size of a bread machine where you can put in your food waste, and this includes meat, poultry, fish, dairy, even some bones. And then you push a button, and in a matter of hours, you get a dry, sterile, odorless, and nutrient-rich soil amendment that comes out. The machine can be used anywhere that has a plug. Most people store it in their kitchen or their basement or even in a heated garage. And the Food Cycler will process on average between 1 and 3 kilograms of food per cycle. Each cycle is pretty much an overnight process. It takes between 4 and 8 hours to complete. And it uses between 0.8 and 1.5 kilowatt hours of power, which is similar to having a computer plugged in for the same amount of time. And then the result is just about a handful of dry, sterile, and odorless soil amendment or a fertilizer type substance that can be used in your garden, in an existing composting system, sometimes can be given to a local farm or in a community garden. And so just to briefly look at our product family here that we use in our municipal programs, we have the FC30, which is a 2.5 liter capacity unit, and then the Maestro, which is a 5 liter capacity unit. We find that in our programs, residents with larger families or households or who create a lot more food waste at home will often go for the larger machine, but essentially we wanted to have options for our residents and our municipal partners. So as I kind of mentioned with the bucket capacities, 2.5 liter and 5 liter buckets, they reduce the weight and volume of the food waste by about 90%. So by putting in a liter of food waste or 2 liters, you end up with 100 or 200 grams of a very dry, powdery substance that still retains a lot of the nutrient value that can go into your garden. And speaking of this byproduct, it is completely dry, it's an inert biomass, and I kind of mentioned some of the beneficial uses there during the video. Most common and popular is adding to the garden soil, but many other uses such as backyard compost, local farms, community gardens. It really is a multi-use byproduct. And then from an environmental standpoint, the Food Cycler is a net negative carbon solution. And what this means is that just like planting trees or using solar panels, when you use the Food Cycler to avoid bringing food waste to a landfill, you're avoiding more greenhouse gases than you're creating in the process. And the same can't be said for other municipal operations such as waste facilities or waste and recycling collection services, which rely on a large fleet of emitting vehicles. So in terms of an economic impact, this solution offers a return on investment by significantly reducing the waste management costs. Depending on what your traditional services and fees are, you're looking at savings of upwards of $100 to $150 per ton when you compare it to the traditional methods that involve hauling and disposal. Now, one thing we've learned from working with our municipal partners is that residents are very interested in being part of the solution. They want to try these new things, they want options, and they want their government to bring these different innovative options to their community. And with the Food Cycler, you get to bring something innovative and tangible to your residents. They don't need to live in a big city to be able to divert their organics. And we really believe that food waste diversion should be available to all Canadians, regardless of where they live. And then with the Food Cycler, what we're doing is we're reducing waste right at the source at that household level. And no pun intended, but we're focusing on that low-hanging fruit, as we like to call it, because since food waste accounts for such a large portion of our household waste, it is the single most impactful strategy to reducing it and achieving any kind of diversion targets you may have. So I mentioned earlier that we're working with several municipalities across Canada. To date, we've completed pilot programs in over 40 municipalities and over 4,700 households, and the results have been overwhelmingly positive. We were able to achieve a significant amount of net new waste diversion. We had a generous user experience rating of 4.6 out of 5 stars. And for those who got involved with the program, we had a 98% participation rate. Many municipalities that we worked with have expanded their programs to more households within their community after their initial pilot program is complete. I'll give an example with one of our bigger success stories, Nelson out in British Columbia. They did 2 successful pilot programs, and then since then, they're now in the process of putting a Food Cycler in every home in their city of 11,000 people. So as we get near the end here, I'll just mention that Food Cycle Science was selected as a finalist in Impact Canada's Food Waste Reduction Challenge, and we've been given a large portion of federal funding to go directly towards these programs. We're in the process of competing in the final stage of this challenge, and any funding that we receive in the final stage would go right back into these programs, just as we've been doing with the money from the second round. So to briefly go over the pilot program, it is a 12-week project. Residents would purchase a Food Cycler at a subsidized rate from the municipality. They would then use the unit and track the number of cycles per week. And then at the end, the residents get to keep their Food Cycler, and we ask them to complete a brief survey so that we can evaluate the program's success. And then these results are presented back to you by us in a final report or a feasibility study to help with making future waste management decision-making. And then this is one of my last slides here before I wrap up, just a breakdown of the subsidy model for the units within the program. Basically, Food Cycle Science provides a municipal discount and then throws in the federal funding from Impact Canada. And this gets the price of each unit down by 50%. And then we ask there's a municipal subsidy of $100 per household, which really brings the resident cost down quite low and allows it to be accessible for residents at the most affordable cost. So basically, with our pilot programs, we recommend different pilot sizes based on the population of the town. For a town of your size, we would recommend starting with a 50 household pilot, collecting the data, and then going from there to see if an expanded program would be of interest. These are just recommendations, and we're quite flexible in pilot sizes. And I think I'm nearing the end of my time here, so just want to say thank you very much for listening to my presentation. We'd like to welcome your town as partners in this Food Waste Reduction Challenge. And today that I kindly just ask that you receive this presentation as information. And if there would be any interest in partnering with us for a funded pilot project, I just ask that you refer this to staff for a report and recommendation. And I know that I threw a lot of information at you there. So again, thank you for allowing me to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jacob. Excellent. Very, very nice presentation. I'm impressed. Any comments, questions from council?
Deputy Mayor, thank you very much, Jacob. I think that was actually quite inspiring, lowering volume by 90%. Would certainly reduce the overall operational cost of the green card pickup, which happens weekly in our town in the summertime. We have a joint venture between all of our regional municipal units here in this area, as you may know, the Municipal Joint Services Board that has kind of core responsibility for the waste management function. And I do think CEO Dillon, it would be wise for us to put Jacob in touch with Leslie and the leadership team of the Joint Services Board to talk about how we could maybe take advantage of this opportunity for a further study or trial based on the due diligence and expertise at the Joint Services Board. So maybe that's something we can do. But I think, fundamentally, this business case kind of rings true to me, that if we could just simply reduce the green card pickup in the summer from, every week to every second week, that would have a big financial reward.
And I guess that would be my comment in terms of bringing it to MJSB. Is the town interested in taking on a pilot of this as has been proposed versus would we want to refer to MJSB and then they'd consider how potentially to pilot it locally, but the benefits of a program, can accrue first to the people who sign up first. So
Fair enough.
in any case, I think as per the presenter's point here, it should be up to council to bring up at a subsequent meeting. So if anybody would like to add, refer to MJSB or get back to them and ask how we can participate or whatever to the next meeting agenda, that's normally what we do on presentations.
Yeah, as per policy, we can't make decisions on the presentation, but I think from the faces I can see, council is impressed and would be interested in having conversations about it. So thank you for the information, and I'm sure staff or us will be in touch to move this further along.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor and Council and members of staff. I appreciate you taking the time, and I enjoyed presenting to you tonight. So have a great rest of the night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jacob.
thanks.
Technology does work, yeah.
Any other comments, or we move to the next agenda item? Okay, corresponding items, action items 4.1, autism awareness, Nova Scotia. Any comments on staff?
Well, I guess just in the remind that we do flag raisings and we don't do proclamations. We've got a couple of requests for both on this agenda. And it looks like all the flag raising times line up. I don't think there's any duplicates there.
Yeah.
So that's at council's discretion to direct staff to fly some flags. I think most of the groups said they would provide them. I believe.
I believe it's the policy that the group provide the flag.
Well, it is, except council has the discretion to provide one ourselves and has done so on occasion.
Oh. I didn't know.
Well, we amended the policy to allow council broader discretion around
I see.
flying flags discretionarily, so, yeah.
I believe we would have to purchase the access awareness flag.
So can we
One
deal
of them
with
may
this
be
first?
offered, but not both.
Can we deal with the first one, the autism one, and then we can? Yes.
And move that we provide permission and support to fly the Autism Nova Scotia Social Work Chapter flag at the date requested.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Norman Croft. On the question?
So they are supplying that flag, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe so.
On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Long Hill safety concerns, letter from Paula.
So I could just comment on the record here that staff have been in touch with Paula and we continue to be, and we'll be, I expect, meeting with her and possibly some other neighbors on site. So if not directed to do anything, we'll still be doing that and we'll still be taking action as necessary. And if council's any further direction, I'm happy to receive it.
Council?
Leave it in staff hands. It says that they've got to start on it, so.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well, I don't know much about this development, but are the questions that she has asked here, are those real or are they information that's new to us? Like there's about what is being built there, like do we know that.
Yes, I do believe we do.
Yeah, I guess I was only taking this as to the concerns around the parking and traffic safety.
Okay,
The other questions having to do with the development, well, I think council is aware that, because questions have been raised, that this was an as of right development, so it accords with our planning documents. They've gone through the correct processes with our planner. So there really was no role for decision makers in that. And they've got all their permits in place for the planned construction there.
Just refresh our memory as to how many units are going in
Well, she's seeing 16 here. I think it may
It was
be,
12.
yeah, it's phased. It's phased.
Yeah, I think the
Councillor
planner,
Calvo?
the planner said, in the response to me when I sent that email, I think she said 16.
I think it's
Yeah,
phased.
and a couple of them were like, duplexes, little
So
duplexes.
maybe 12 buildings or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Finn?
I just think, the takeaway here is there is a lot more activity in that, in that corner now than there has been historically, and I'm sure the author of the letters, does have legitimate concerns, as long as staff feels empowered enough to have an evaluation, and if there's anything we can do to be supportive, if there's an engineering study required, I'm sure that will come back to us.
Yeah, and
For
if
the
any,
discussion.
major infrastructural change would come back. Typically, if we're putting up signs for no parking clarification, stuff like that, that will usually come back to council. I will say that the commercial development that is referenced there across the street, the former antique store location, did not have off-street parking associated with it. And so as long as the use remains that, it doesn't trigger any additional parking requirement. But because it has been dormant for a long time, the additional traffic there would be new and does need to be managed, but ultimately, we can't really expect the property owner to provide any additional parking. So people will be parking on the shoulder or in the trail parking lot. And, ultimately, we really can't, we can't do anything to compel the business to add additional parking.
there? That's provided it stays the same as it was before.
Yeah, if it changes the nature of the business changes, then new parking would be required. But as long as it's an antique store or whatever, a retail business that is aligned with the former use, then they wouldn't need to go through a new requirement for parking. And it never had any more parking than what it has.
Just one request, to make it easy for me, if you can go through me, it'll make it much easier. I'm trying to allocate
Oh,
time
sorry.
to folks. It'll make it much easier for me, so I know
Absolutely.
the process you're following. So we're comfortable with staff following it up. Do we need a motion to?
I would like to make a motion that staff continue the dialogue with Paula Griffin and report back to staff. Report back to council at some future date.
Moved by Councillor Calvo. Seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. 4.3. 49th annual volunteer awards.
This is an annual process. I think council does typically direct staff to promote the opportunity to nominate someone. So we can have a motion to do that.
Motion to do that.
I'll make that motion, thank
Moved
you.
by Councillor Fearney. You have a second, Councillor Wilson. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mayor. 4.4.
I guess a two-part motion, Deputy Mayor. I move that council direct staff to procure a access awareness week flag as directed in the correspondence. And to provide approval to fly the flag at the date requested.
You have a second? Seconded by Councillor Calvo. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. That's it for correspondence action items. We have
So will staff let them know that we don't do proclamations, or have they let them know?
We can let them know the outcome that we do flags and we don't do proclamations.
You don't need a motion for that.
I don't think so, because we have to tell them that we're
Policy.
doing something. Well, that's not policy yet.
Oh, well, okay.
Okay, we don't have any correspondence or information items. Next is 6 staff reports. We have a big one, 6.1. Any comments? See you.
Just that it's, as you say, the big one, this time around, we are not including the budget report. Typically at this time, we just phase that into the opening budget, so Ashley's getting all those numbers for year end put together, and rather than me trying to do something that won't be quite, where she's going, we'll see it in the next week, but other than that, I'll take any question.
Council.
Don't have to.
This will be a new one.
Yeah.
Councillor Wilson,
Move that we accept the staff report for information.
moved by Councillor Wilson, accept the report for information, seconded by Councillor Carver. On the question, there you have a question? Or your second? Okay, on the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. 6.2, staff memo 995 Main Street.
Thank you,
comments?
Deputy Mayor. So there is a recommendation provided here, but essentially, usually when people are initiating a development agreement process, we tend to get a letter off the top, but because this one's been back and forth and around, we got a application, we didn't get a letter, so I just put a quick summary of the application and the history there. But ultimately, same as when we receive a letter, it would be forwarded to the planners, who then report back to PAC. So
Yeah.
that's what I'd recommend.
So there are 2 motions there.
Oh, yes, the second part, I think everybody's familiar with this point, but there would be a street excavation permit required for their proposed water supply. It's something that normally would be handled at the level of staff, but because we have the opportunity here to make it explicit for these folks, I would recommend that council go ahead and approve that unless there's any concerns. But yeah, staff will get them to complete a street
So
excavation.
they're required to bring the street back to the normal it was beforehand.
Yes, yeah, all the costs would be their responsibility.
Councillor Carver.
I just have a question that I tried to get an answer to earlier, which is about a waiver. Do the property owners sign a waiver around any potential damage from climate, from sea rise and so on? Do the property owners sign? Because if we give them a permission to build there, do the property owners sign a waiver?
There's a lot of language in what the development agreement was originally intended to say as far as this goes. So I don't really want to go out on a limb here and say that there's not a separate document, but the documentation in the original development agreement did kind of address the point that you're raising. And yeah, sorry, if you want to direct the question to the planners, I'm sure they can give you a more detailed response, but.
With that in mind, I make the motion that council refer the request to amend the development agreement for 995 Main Street to the planners, and that council approve the owners of 995 Main Street to install a water line under Main Street and direct staff to make the necessary arrangements to coordinate with the property owners.
Moved by Councillor Carver. You have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kenny on the question. Any comments? Councillor Kenny?
Well, as you know, I'm pleased that the proponents are moving forward. In a perfect world, I think everyone around the table wishes that we had municipal services in that area. That was certainly our aspiration 2 years ago. Unfortunately, we're not funded at this time, so this is the only choice for the development to proceed. But, it's good news that they're proceeding. And in the fullness of time, hopefully we will have town services throughout that corridor, and and this wouldn't be required, but we'll take our win where we can get it. And good luck to these folks for, getting their project started.
Councillor Lemonster.
I'm just curious if, what their plan, would it include, a place where they could hook up to town services? Should we do town services in that area? Is that known?
So the well line is going to run under the street, so the only question would be, will the grade on the water line line up with the well line? And I guess we'll have the opportunity to take that into account when we approve the depth of the well line. But yeah, so essentially you just come right along and tie the well line into the new main if that came along. So it'd actually be easier than it would be for just about any other person in town, because they'd have a lateral, even though the lateral wasn't connected to a main. And then we connect the main to lateral. So yeah, they wouldn't really need to do anything.
Yeah. Councillor Finn?
Sorry, one last question. Is there any virtue in dealing with the, electrical issue and, providing power to that side of the street too? Or is there, that just hasn't come up yet, about how to electrify on the other side of the street? Either terrestrially or through buried cable. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the neighbors and the neighbor's perspective of having a power line running in front of the Ocean View.
I think that would be default to overhead, but we can ask the utility folks to look into the cost of the line. Yeah, that's a good thing. I didn't even think
If
about that.
you're taking. a
They wouldn't have
line.
considered that, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think it would have just been a overhead.
Good question. Any other comments on that? We moved and seconded on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Moving on to staff report. No, we moved that on. We move on to the area report, 6.4, community solar garden monthly report.
Deputy Mayor,
Councillor
I'd move that we accept the area report, community solar garden monthly report for information. For
Moved by
information
Councillor
purposes.
Finney, seconded by Councillor Now. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. 6.6, rent donation policy.
Thank you.
Planning and development.
6.5.
Oh, sorry,
6.5.
my bad. My counting is on. Planning and Development Services Agreement, 6.5.
So this is just presented for information.
Okay.
There is a recommendation there, and the recommendation is to approve a 3-month extension. If anyone has any questions, but
Councillor Carroll,
I'll move the council approve the extension of the current planning and development services agreement with the municipality of Chester by 3 months.
moved by Councillor Carroll. Seconded by Councillor Wilson, on the question.
With a proviso, if I may,
Yeah.
would it be possible for council to see a copy of the existing agreement?
sure.
Because I'm kind of curious how much the cost is.
Yes. And if I just comment on that in the sense that seeing the extension sort of makes me think that the current agreement doesn't have within it embedded in it a portion when that kickstarts the renewal, so that you're not having to extend because you've given yourself enough time to have that dialogue. Is there something of that in place right now? Or?
I don't believe there is. We have been in a dialogue with the staff there for almost the full year, so I don't, not sure that would have changed anything. And again, I don't think there's any issues with this renewal. It just, they have had some turnover. We've had some turnover. If they, to get a legal opinion on anything, including just the renewal. So time is being taken, but yeah, we can look at if the new version should include some language around that. I'll look at that.
And
Councillor Scott?
has the part-time person started yet? Wasn't there a part-time person coming
For which
in
role?
under the services that we get for Chester? Or,
I'm not sure about the reference to a part-time person. There is another development officer, so the same role that Heather occupies.
yes,
And she will be occasionally here.
okay,
But she's full-time. It just, she's
Okay.
not full-time for us.
right, that's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah.
So has that started?
Yeah, she has started.
So
Yeah.
has that helped with the workload here?
I mean, I wouldn't say there's any appreciable difference right now, because I think she's probably still just getting up to speed on the role.
Okay.
But I'm sure Heather will be very glad to have somebody else on the team there, and I'm sure it will have an impact on the workload. But
Okay.
You seem to be much more informed than we are. It's not. Yeah. But on the, did we?
We haven't voted yet.
Yeah, we haven't voted, yeah. So on the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. 6.6, bench donation policy.
So this is a typo on the agenda because it's actually bench donation program. There isn't a policy recommendation here. One of the oldest tasks assigned on our task assigned report. And, you know, effectively here, what was assigned to the staff was pursuant to the donation policy, which plenty of work went into and which we did use for a tree donation program during the centennial. Is to basically use that policy here to frame up a public donation program centered around benches and picnic tables. So there's a lot of information and there's a recommendation there to approve the bench donation program as presented. I'll just highlight that there is some budgetary implication. Essentially, the way this is being presented is to solicit donations associated with the installation of benches and picnic tables, but the town would be responsible for installation costs. And most of the time, that's concrete work at a minimum, a concrete pad for everything except for the park benches. And if that concrete pad is not already contiguous with a accessible walking surface, then there will need to be some amount of concrete pathway between the pad and the walking surface. And so if you're putting it right on a sidewalk, you hope it will be right on the sidewalk. But for example, there's a request from the chamber to put a picnic table beside the VIC. We'll need to ensure that from wherever the parking is designated to the picnic table, there's a level route. So those costs to the town will be variable depending on the bench and the picnic table location, but they wouldn't be passed on to the donor. And, you know, additionally, the town can contribute some of that 20,000 or budget in excess of that 20,000 that's being recommended for directly installing tables and benches. So, you know, if the town would like to do that, or potentially leveraging that to encourage donations, so some type of a matching program, or that would be discretionary on council's part. But I do urge council to take the time to find out what appetite there is in the community around donations. You know, we have a lot of locations in town, so surely even if council wants to put a couple out proactively, there's a number of locations that we could serve through this program. So all that being said, that's the recommendation. I'll take any question.
I know it came up at the chamber meeting. Why do you need the pads? I'm assuming it's for accessibility.
Yes, yeah, so traditionally, we always concrete mount benches and picnic tables that are in locations where they may walk away. So that's what the town has done. You'll find most of them are already bolted down on concrete. But now that there are further accessibility requirements, having that level surface is a requirement with benches. So that's the change now. We've always done it, but it's more sensitive now that it actually be a level path from wherever people are parked or walking on a level surface to that seating.
So I think it's a great plan and I'm delighted to see it finally coming to fruition after the fact that it was years ago that the then age-friendly committee made the recommendation. So yay for that. I do have a couple of comments. One is that I'm concerned about the park bench that was suggested. Because I was involved several years ago when the age-friendly committee was collaborating with the public works manager then in selecting and choosing sites for the benches that were installed then. And it was a deliberate decision to for the town to buy much sturdier benches. The wood that's involved in the ones that were installed in the aquatic gardens, for example, or beside the duck pond in Jubilee Park, where they're like 2x2s. They're very, very bulky. Cubic, whatever they are, yeah. And much more vandalism resistant than the ones that were pictured with the park bench here, which I think are just 1x2s or 1x3 wood. So I'd really consider the possibility of researching that part some more. The other comment I had was just to consider adding an option for donors to consider a covered picnic table, which it's nice sometimes to have a cover for people having picnics or sitting outdoors.
So I guess just to comment on those. So I think the specifics of the wooden park bench in terms of, you know, what exact design is selected is optional, I guess. We do want to pick one that we'll stick with. But as long as it's wooden and the price point is similar, the issue with the park bench, like why you would go with a wooden park bench, is because we are only going to locate those in naturalized wooded areas. So it's never going to be the accessible bench, because in order to get to it, you have to go up and down and over roots and, you know, so in any place where you're going to have an accessible path of travel, you're going to have to go with the accessible bench design. So then we're just talking within the low price point bench that isn't accessible, are there some better designs? And if you have, I can go take a picture, but you know, we could, before we launch this, we can find a design that is better if it's at the same price point and has the same characteristics. I'm sure that's great. And then as far as the addition of another one at the covered level, I think that adding it that way makes sense. I think another option the town could consider down the road is if we have installed some and we want to cover them, that is absolutely something that can be done separately. They do sell them combined, but you'll find a lot of provincial parks, they found it more cost effective to build a shelter and then just install a picnic table with the shelter. So we could always do that at the town's expense. So yes, that's a.
Just my supplementary, I'm not sure that the type of bench that I was describing would qualify under a lower price than the park bench at $500 that has been suggested. But this one does not address vandalism concerns as well as the heavier, the one with the heavier wood. 2x2, 3x3,
But
whatever.
I'm sure that's not 2x4
This is 2x4.
on this bench. I think that's 2x4, but like to me.
That was the kind of bench that was in the aquatic garden before the one that's there now. And it was the benches, the boards get torn off. But
Doesn't matter.
I'm
what you put
putting it
there,
over
they can do that. Doesn't matter what you put there, they can do that.
Well, and that is some of the principle behind, you know, a lower cost bench is
Mm.
you're basically deciding to replace part or all of the bench more often. But given the locations, that is a likelihood because they're also not monitored. Like if you put a bench in a place that you can't see it from the road, the chances of something happening to it would increase. So that's
different philosophies.
yeah.
We'll have one more.
Yeah,
I mean, is
they're
it
all
possible-
schemed at the same
Is it possible to check the records in Public Works for the purchase orders for those ones that were installed in at some point, 2016 maybe?
Yeah, I'm sure we can.
Okay. Any other comments? There's a motion with this. Councilor Wilson,
Yes, I'd like to move the council approve the bench donation program as presented.
moved by Councilor Wilson, you have a second there? Councilor Now, seconds. On the question, all in favor?
Oh, I think I'm gonna vote against it because I am concerned about the $500 bench.
Okay.
So it's sort of a principle.
Okay. On the
After 3
question,
years.
all in favor? Motion's carried. Oh, yeah.
Duly noted.
Even though I support it.
Yeah, so that's an interesting turn of events.
Yeah.
6.7, 2023, 2022.
Deputy Mayor, no surprise, it's March 30th, and it's our time of the year where we have to address our doubtful accounts. And I would move that council direct staff to write off accounts in the amount of $5,164.40, of which $4678.59 is associated with the electrical utility and $485.81 is associated with the water utility as presented.
Moved by Councilor Feeney, you have a seconder?
Seconded.
The mayor, seconds?
Just one quick question,
Yeah, that's
and
okay.
you can just take a note, and CAO, if you don't mind. I'm just trying to align the historical information in the deck with the number that's inside the electrical utility financial statements. And this came up, as you remember, in the URB meeting, we talked about the doubtful accounts for the utility. And it was, I believe, somewhere around $21,000. And we just, I think from council's recollection, we were like, geez, that number sounds a little higher than we would have expected and doesn't align with this number. I just, maybe if you just take that away and we revisit it down the road if there's anything council needs to know. There must be some other number inside the number in the financial statements. It would be good for council just to kind of know, because our expectation is that this number would align with the number for doubtful accounts in the financial statements in due course. I'm sure there's some other number that's getting included in that. I don't know what it would be. I'm just,
Yeah, given the year-over-year average,
Anyway.
is only about 4,000 that we've written off, yeah.
Yeah. okay, thank you.
Councilor Scott?
I'm just wondering if there are sort of historic statistics on repeat offenders of not paying. Because maybe there's a financial issue that the people who can't pay or aren't paying can't pay, and maybe we can help them with some sort of program or find resources that may help them.
So I guess the reason we do electrical write-offs is almost entirely, in this case, is entirely because people left. And they left the accounts outstanding.
Okay.
So unless they move back, and I'm pretty sure Kim will recognize these names, then we wouldn't have an opportunity to interact with them again.
Okay, I was just making sure there wasn't an opportunity to help somebody out.
The nature of our
Yeah.
electrical is always that when people know they're leaving, they're not motivated to pay it. And that's, we do send them for collection, so it does haunt people, but depending on where they moved and what they're up to, it may not ever be.
Okay.
But for me, a slight question was around these very low immaterial numbers and the presentation of names there, and whether that's something that we necessarily need to do, like the negative 0.66.
So that list wasn't included in the meeting package, it was
Okay.
just for council's
Yeah,
information.
okay.
It's only the overall numbers.
Sorry for that, yeah, so that's not public.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
I know, you wouldn't know.
I was
Check the website first.
With negative numbers mean it's a credit. So no, it's a credit that come back at the first $3 of,
When the bills, things are printed, they print everything that's over
Fair
or
enough.
under the zero mark.
Good to know, so.
Call for the question.
It was moved and seconded, on the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Next one is Mahombe Pool.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we've had, as it notes in the report, a couple of years where we've known something was coming in terms of the condition of the pool based on its age and consideration of accessibility requirements, which, again, based on its age, it was surely to have some issues. We haven't completed a full accessibility audit of the pool yet. That was one of the items included in our application to the community accessibility program for this year, and we haven't heard back on it yet. But it's obvious that significant capital investment is going to be needed just to sustain the current use. And so what this report is trying to get at is we have a season this summer where we can get through with minimal cost in terms of repairs, but we've been advised this is likely the last one. So if we're planning around some type of decision that will lead to the future of the pool, council would need to initiate that process now in order to be in a position to do any work next year, if that is the way that process unfolds. So the first step that I imagine for that would be some type of a public engagement process that will provide council with some information and perspective around where to go with pool capital investment. So I wouldn't want to do that unless council wanted to engage the community, which obviously will create an expectation that we may be planning to make some investment in the pool. So my recommendation was to direct staff to develop a public engagement plan, but obviously this is also a discussion for budget. So if council prefers to defer that until after the budget process, that is acceptable.
Councilor Wilson?
Yes, I think a public engagement plan in this case is a good idea, but I would urge us, by us, I guess I mean staff, to prepare realistic alternatives for people to talk about rather than just an open-ended question of what do you think? Because what do you think is often predicated by how much it's going to cost. So if it's going to cost $400,000 to repair the existing pool and make it accessible, and $450,000 to put in a new pool in a new place, that's a very different question than some other ones. And I have no idea from reading this what the development cost might be.
That's the one.
And we will be looking for grant money for this, soon, because
So right now, we've applied for grant money for doing the accessibility audit. I would suggest the next opportunity to apply for grant money is either for the design work on a pool renovation or a new pool, or for the capital. But based on the timing, if we get to a point in the fall where council wants to get into some design work in order to expedite possible construction, I would say we might end up forgoing any opportunity for funding to support design work in favor of preparing to apply for funding to support construction. Just because you essentially are going to wait 1 year for every type of funding you'll go to the province for. So we would be ending up pushing the design work into the following year, which certainly would mean, I think, probably a 2-year closure for the pool regardless of the option, and that's obviously not what we're looking for. So,
well,
but that will be determined by what direction council wants to go with the work.
and there are one-time grants for construction of recreational facilities like this. So sometimes those requests come in years ahead of time. You know, because there's such a lineup of organizations, so you may want to think about or making contact with someone in CCH to let them know that this is something that the town is possibly coming forward with.
Yeah, we will be in touch with them. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
So, I guess my only thought is, I mean, we've had the pool, I believe it was established in 67 or 69.
Oh, no, I'm not that.
No,
No, I was in
grade.
grade 7 when that opened, so that would have been about
1983?
1970. No. It was around 70, 72.
72, okay, so,
72.
so, you know, it's been,
Yeah.
so it's I guess the point, and we've had these situations before. This is it's a 50-year investment in the new pool based on, modern engineering, modern efficiencies, all
I
of
think it
the,
was probably a 30-year useful life, and then a
Right,
substantial
I
amount of
mean,
work was done to keep it
so-
alive for 50 years.
right, and so I think if we're going to talk about a new pool, then we have to at least be open-minded to think new pool could potentially mean new pool in a new location. And although I've, multi-generations have gone to the pool in that location, I do wonder about it from an accessibility perspective, being down the ramp. I'm just wondering if we're going to have a conversation about that kind of a capital investment with a big commitment from the town, that we really should be open-minded to at least exploring all the optimized long-term location for the community. And whether it's there, fine, but if there's other perspectives on a better location, then I just think we need a plan that allows us to be open-minded about the possibilities.
Councillor Wilson.
And just to follow up on Councillor Feeney, if we could come to a conclusion about a new pool and a new location, it would allow the thing to be more seamless and didn't necessarily have to go on a season with a pool.
Well,
So I have a comment that I don't know if it will make sense, but I'm not in support of a public engagement process, because from my perspective, we need to invest in a new pool. It's not a question of whether we will not. If we really are thinking of Mahombe as a town that is supposed to attract new families, it's supposed to grow,
have to have a pool.
we need to invest in that in the pool. And rather than have this, I guess, buying time process, and as you mentioned, the issue of there are grants that come up, and putting in an application early in advance is a good idea. I think what we need to do as council is think of this as a capital investment. How do we make it happen? And start planning that, as opposed to saying we want to go back to the community and seek views about it. Because if some members of the community come and say, no, we don't want the pool, will we say we won't build a pool, given our strategic plan of growing the town? There's certain elements that, for me, sort of doesn't feel like we necessarily have to do that. I would say we engage the community around how the pool looks like, who it caters to, and the nuances of how that construction is done and where it's done.
We could put the library beside it.
That's
Because again, at the pocketbook.
Thank you for
And-
that.
And members of the public
Yeah.
sit on the board, right? That can give feedback from the community as
Yeah.
well.
And it's not to say that I don't like the community feedback on things, but I think this is one of those issues where I think we don't provide recreation services. There's a facility that provides recreation to the community to a large extent, draws a lot of people in the summer here. It's a no-brainer. The pool will go away, so why engage the community on that particular aspect? And maybe I'm wrong. Mayor, you had something to say?
No,
Okay.
I think it's a great idea.
Yes, Mayor?
I just said, I think it's a great idea. I think a town's commitment to the pool is somewhat overdue. And I look forward to the discussions over the next few months.
Super. CAO and then Councillor Dodd.
Well, I was gonna just speak to how you could kind of move in this alternate direction you're talking about, but if, don't want to step on Councillor Carver if you want.
Yeah, yes, I'm not, thank you. I support entirely what the deputy mayor has just said. Because I found the suggestion about public engagement kind of vague. I was wondering, well, what are we asking? What questions are we asking? What kind of input do we want from the public? And we already have the swimming pool society, which is comprised of the community, the members of the community. I'm sure, I don't know how many members they have, but that's a vehicle for sampling feelings in the community, or if we think that's important, and the society may well want to do that. I'd like to just carry on more or less in the way that assume that we need to do it and go ahead and think of the possibility of other locations.
CEO.
So I think the alternate direction here would be that staff be directed to include in the draft 2023-24 annual budget funding allocation for design and construction of a new or substantially renovated, I guess that's your choice in terms of the motion. You can include both, it doesn't have to pick one, pool for or allocation for the Mahone Bay pool. So yeah, I think if you want to do that, this is great timing. We haven't gone into the budget. We'll just put the allocation in the budget. And if it comes out the other side, that's what we need to then apply for provincial funding. That's what you need to engage the community in a very different discussion, which says we are doing a thing and we'd like your, engagement on that.
Yeah. Councillor Finn and then Councillor
I think that's a wise move forward with design and engineering. And then probably at some point when we have the footprint understood about what a modern accessible pool looks like with whatever the current standards around fencing and all those things, which I'm sure have changed since 1972. But we do, I think, really need a conversation or strike a committee of some kind to talk about all the options around location. And just to make sure we're not forgetting about an obvious solution. And because I do think there are a number of locations that may be superior. And in the fullness of time, if we just decide we're going to put it exactly where it currently exists, fair enough. But I do think we need a path forward to be able to compile the opportunities and then judge them on some kind of a matrix to see, hey, which one of these makes more sense, whether it could be up by the new community field, up by the Mahone Bay Center, could be across the street from the fire hall, could be across the street from the Legion. I mean, there's a number of locations that a new 50-year asset may be best able to reside. We just need to talk about it, and in the fullness of time, I think all the right decision would get made, but we just need to figure out how we would do that.
CEO.
So I know we're already talking about another motion, but this would be pursuant to that suggestion. So whether we put the other motion out there,
Do you view that as
staff to
helpful?
come back with a report on potential locations for a new Mahone Bay pool is a simple recommendation or direction. The only question I would have with that is that going to be constrained to locations on existing town-owned property? Or are we going to speculate on the acquisition of property? So I just, because it's a much different scope of work for staff to come back on one or the other.
Mhm.
So that's another motion that could be made,
Mhm.
just to expedite this process.
Can you deal with the first one?
Yeah.
The first one, oh, sorry.
Yeah, Councillor, so my apologies.
That's okay. I think that's where we could use the public engagement involved is a location. But I think that's gonna be the prime thing that we're gonna need to establish before we decide, okay, we're gonna put $500,000 in the pool, but where are we gonna put it? Let's get a location, then we can, you know. The current location's not bad, but I'm not sure how much room there is, accessibility there is there for an expanded facility.
Councillor Calvin?
I'd just like to make a motion that council directs staff to submit some estimates for pool construction in the 23-24 budget. Is that enough?
Does that capture the more? I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, what I was
Plan
engineering,
and
design and
engineering.
construction. I mean, what I would do is put the engineering and design in 2023-24, and then I'll put construction in the 10-year budget showing for next year. But you don't have to make that point, just say engineering, design and construction. Right?
Strike construction, say engineering.
Yeah, because I think it's really important that that be in the 10-year projection, because if we look at how we can actually pay for it, we gotta have it in the projection.
See if we get some other
Could
money.
have built it next to Suzanne's, but you built the house.
Moved as
I've got lots of room in the back.
Moved as amended. Do you have a second for that? Councillor Feeney. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Is there another motion
Locations, please.
on location?
Yeah, just how to phrase it elegantly. This would move the council direct staff to, I don't know, are we evaluating? Are we gonna evaluate? How are you gonna take input? How will we receive input about or collate the options?
Yeah, I was thinking it's probably a two-step process. If staff are directed to provide a report on potential locations,
Okay.
and then council can say, let's talk about how to engage the community on these, because until we know what the options that
Mhm.
we're considering. And then the only question for your motion is
Yeah.
that potential locations on town-owned property or just potential locations, so that you can decide.
But I have a suggestion. Why don't we say, council direct staff to investigate potential locations for a new Mahone Bay pool with public input that can be via just a survey, doesn't necessarily have to be elaborate. It just asks folks, do you have thoughts about a potential location? Just send us the location, and then in the staff report, you will provide what you feel is feasible, and then there'll be a list of the public. These are.
Yeah, it'll just, I mean, I guess, you know, I would, the only concern I'd have about that would be, are we saying, here are areas, are there other areas? What do you think about these areas? Or are we just saying, do you have any suggestions for a location parallel to staff looking at possible locations? Because my only concern is about floating possible locations that I might identify without bringing that to you guys. So that's my only concern about putting it all in one package is.
No, so I'm saying that in the package you'll provide the staff analysis of what you feel would be the potential locations. But there will be an input session where the community sort of has suggested, you'll not be sharing. with
So
the community.
open-ended.
Open-ended.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
And they will just say, well.
That would be easy to do.
In my backyard.
Yeah. Suzanne's right.
Yeah, exactly. Does that work?
Somebody might write back, I've got a great piece of land, I'd like to sell it to you for.
So, Kelly, do you have the deputy mayor's edit there? So I'd be happy to move that. I'll have you to take credit for the deputy mayor's motion and move it along under my name.
Moved by
Thank you.
Councillor Feeney. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Now. On
We ask,
On the question?
can we ask the clerk to repeat the motion?
That council directs staff to investigate potential locations for a new Mahone Bay pool, including a survey of the community. It's not very good, but.
That works.
Yeah, that's fine, we know what they meant by the survey.
Yeah.
Are we good? On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. 6.9, review of parking areas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor. So this, in contrast to the bench program, this is one of the shortest turnarounds of a thing. Because Jonathan was quick to get out there. He wants to get the painting tender published before too much longer, so we want to confirm these. So we surveyed existing accessible parking locations. There were 21 locations currently. It does look like the map, and Councillor Carver asked about this, it does look like the map cut off 2 of those locations, but I think they were included in the count, they just get cut off on the map. And so Jonathan and I went over and looked at a few recommended locations. Mostly it's about adding accessible parking to facilities that don't have it. So there's a couple of parks and the wharf marina facility that don't currently have any post accessible parking. And then there's a couple of places where there's just an opportunity to add kind of an on-street or close to Main Street location. So we're recommending adding 7 for a total of 28. Ultimately, this isn't a permanent, we're going to stop at this. We're always reviewing these locations. And I guess the other thing we reviewed was the no parking zones. So with respect to no parking zones, we didn't provide a map showing those changes, but there are a lot of inconsistencies around the no parking for hydrants and intersections and crossings. And we do want to bring that up to a more standard situation. One example, and I know anytime you're taking away parking spaces, it's difficult for people, but we put in the new Lutheran Church crossing last year. There's exactly one very tight car length between the nearest driveway and that crossing. We didn't paint the curb yellow. People park like nose on the crossing, and it makes it very difficult to see a pedestrian on the church side. So we'll make that no parking for that parking space. I know people like it, and somebody will probably be disappointed, but so there were a number of those that we identified, and it will result in a little bit of a loss of parking, which is bound to happen. But I think it's important to standardize that for public safety.
Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Carver.
Just a housekeeping item really, but I see you're anticipating a new accessible parking at the tennis court,
Yes.
and there are already 3 there.
Oh, so I think that's that. I think that's just meant to reflect.
Oh, okay, that's what's, so just change that to red, okay.
Councillor Carver.
My question is about the ones on Claremont. It looks as if there's 2 marked by the parking behind the pharmacy.
There are 2 currently.
When I drove by there today, I looked at it again, and it looked like there were 2 EV parking spaces and 1 accessible.
So the accessible parking space next to EV place, that's just 1.
Yeah.
But there's also one by the ramp, right on the corner, right on the actual street.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
oh, right.
And
Yeah,
that one, to be honest, is not well placed.
No.
It creates a little bit of a bottleneck.
Because of the curve.
So one of the changes that we were anticipating there is that when you actually count the number of spaces, and if you go down to the intersection and you look at how much there should be no parking from the crosswalk back, all told, there's about a 0.5 of a car length that shouldn't really be there. And we're looking at maybe moving that space just a little bit further back towards the ramp, if we have the opportunity to do so, just to avoid that constriction point. And it's just the corner of the car park there that juts out into the road. So people like to squeeze in as many vehicles as possible, and that already results in somebody sticking out a little bit too far. So
Well,
if
that
we
may,
move that back, people will
Yeah.
probably not be able to squeeze in that extra spot, but.
That may have more to do with a lot of people accessing the pharmacy have mobility issues and they need to be closer to the door. And that's why people squeeze in that area.
So if that's the case, because I
And,
see many people do that, I would strongly
pharmacy-
recommend the addition of more accessible parking.
Yeah.
Because if the people say that they have that concern, they should be using accessible parking. So if there's a concern, I would recommend we add an additional accessible spot there. If that truly is a concern.
Pretty hard right on the street though, because you're parked right up against the curb for somebody to get out if they're in the passenger side.
Yeah, most accessible on-street parking does have that issue though,
Yeah.
but you're right, there'd be a curb.
Well, not all people with mobility issues have accessible plates and whatnot that they can use to park like that. Or someone just may be very ill and temporarily and need close access to the pharmacy.
I'm just gonna say that as traffic authority, regardless of need, those spaces will be taken up by the first people to pull in if they're available.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Am I right? Am I right in thinking that it's parking spaces that are designated as accessible are only to be used by people who have the tags, the
Yeah.
permits?
Yeah.
So if I'm feeling bad someday or weak, or if I've got my sciatica acts up, I have to, I'll park in the regular parking spaces and walk the extra, or park on the opposite side of the road. Which works.
If you don't have a permit, it's first come, first serve. The parking will go to the first person to show up regardless of their ability. And the person who needs it will end up parking much further up the street, but that's just the way it is if you're
But
not
people
designated.
people aren't gonna park in the designated handicap.
No, that's what I'm saying. The only way to reserve a space.
Right,
is to
right,
make
yeah,
it
yes,
accessible.
yes.
You have a question on this?
No?
No?
So it's good work.
Motion,
Yeah. Right, it's great.
moved by Councillor.
Wilson.
Kelly. I just about to call you Councillor Kelly.
I'm like,
Moved by Councillor Wilson. You have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. 6.10, transportation projects.
Get into the double digits.
Yeah.
So this one is another quick turnaround. The council asked for a graphical representation of some upcoming projects just to help let the community know what was expected. And we wanted to make sure to run it by you, but the goal was to get this in the April newsletter, so that will be going out in just a couple of days. We already did get some feedback by email from a couple of members of council. Minor edits, I think, can be taken care of. That's no problem. So if anyone else has any like that, you could mention them now, or you could send me an email, but the recommendation here is that the recommendation is not related. So we're going to post this and we're happy to make some changes. The recommendation in this case is with respect to one of these projects. I did just receive the draft concept report from WSP. I haven't had a chance to review it with Jonathan yet, but they would like to present it to council. And the question would be, with all of the meetings you guys have scheduled, when do you want to do that? We have a lot of budget meetings during the day, so like they would be happy to present to a budget meeting. Maybe we line it up for the second budget meeting, but that's at your discretion.
But if I go to you, my one question was, why does this need a motion?
Well, I guess it doesn't need a motion, but I want an answer.
My question is, how long does the presentation take? Half hour, 30 minutes?
I'm sure with questions, half hour, 40 minutes would be plenty.
Oh,
Yeah.
that long.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could go faster, but you may have a lot of questions.
I'm sure there'll be many
Any
questions.
questions?
Yeah.
Well, if it includes paving over the aquatic gardens, we'll be there a while, but.
That is.
We'll see. Open-minded about what it will say. So Dylan, you'd like to do that early next month, which is
Yeah, I mean,
next week?
We would like to get them to, basically the point of this stage is to pick from concept designs, which one we feel, if any, could be advanced to a pre-design. So that's the hope. We pick one or more for
Every time
pre-design.
we have an hour.
Yeah, so it will be something that we need to dig into a little bit.
And a time already scheduled.
Deputy Mayor, can I
Councillor Wilson, yeah?
just suggest that we tack this presentation onto one of our morning budget meetings, because the hungrier I get, the quieter I get. Usually. It runs up against 12 o'clock.
So get it close to 12.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think the 14th and the 21st would be the obvious choices. So if the councilors don't mind, I'll just ask WSP if they could look at those two possible mornings, and then
Yes.
we'll get it on one of those agendas.
Mayor, you have something to add to that?
No,
Okay. And I would say we don't need a motion, so,
No, I'm
okay,
good.
thank you.
Oh, you can accept this for information. You
Yeah.
can do that.
Yeah, we want to accept the report for information? I think we're happy to have a motion. Council items 7.1. Gaelic Nova Scotia month. Mayor, you're speaking to this?
yeah, we got this request to invite us, and most municipalities, of course, have the same piece of correspondence, to get involved with the Gaelic Council of Nova Scotia in celebrating what they're referring to as the month when they celebrate Gaelic in our province. And May traditionally is the month in which they do that. Now, I would hasten to point out that, as somebody mentioned earlier on another topic, we don't do proclamations in Mahone Bay. We do have an opportunity to fly the flag that the Gaelic group uses. And as far as I know, we would be able to do that in May. So if council is in agreement to provide that support for the idea of celebrating Gaelic in Nova Scotia, then we could write to the association, advise them of our policy on proclamations or lack of same, and ask them to provide us with the flag that we could fly in the month of May.
Is that a motion?
Sure, it's a motion.
Yeah,
I'll second it.
moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Carver. On the question, Councillor Finn?
So just trying to be consistent with the conversation we had a year ago around a request to fly the German flag in recognition of kind of the historical settling of the community. In that particular instance, the nuance was there was a request to fly the national flag of Germany, which had challenges. I think, Mayor, understanding the spirit, this is a symbolic flag representing the Gaelic culture versus a national flag of some kind.
Yes,
Okay. So a shamrock versus the flag of Ireland, for example.
more or less.
So, something like that. Okay, a leprechaun versus
German one with a big
like,
sausage
yeah.
on there.
Yeah. Fair
I
enough.
am the
Okay.
former Minister of Gaelic Affairs.
Did not know that. Fair enough. I love extinct languages.
So the motion speaks to accepting that it can be flown, and you will be requesting them to provide a flag to be flown. I didn't note down the dates of the previous flag requests. There's no clash there, is there?
There's no clash.
That were both made.
One is,
Autism is April.
it's April.
The other request was May, and I think the Gaelic one is May also.
Okay, we can look at, because the access
Policy
awareness
steps.
is for a week, not for the full month, so there's probably.
And this
a way to
would be
make that
this-
work.
Okay. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried.
Awareness Week is May 28th to June 3rd, so they only overlap for the last
2 days.
3 days of May, so
So
we'll just
take the
take
flag
that one down.
earlier.
Okay. 7.2, Lunenburg County Anti-Discrimination and Risk Coordination. Mayor, speaking to this.
Yeah, this is, we've talked about this on a number of occasions. It began back with the mayor's deputies and CAO's organization. And there was a contractor engaged, and that was subsequently dismissed. And we now have a proposal for a regional anti-racism group to be formed with a group, a coordinator to be hired. There will be members attending the committee nominated from the elected side of the House, one from each of the 5 municipalities in the county. And there will be citizens also elected to the same committee organization. And what the Chester, the municipality of the District of Chester, who is taking the lead on this project, has written to the other 4 communities in Lunenburg County to provide them with the background, the proposed terms of reference, the work description for the coordinator, which is not unlike the coordinator of the Regional Accessibility Committee, and also the duties for the position in the work description. And they are asking the councils to indicate their approval in principle for the work that is being presented here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Comments or questions or?
Yeah, Councillor Carver.
Thank you. I absolutely support the whole proposal. But I do have one small question about the remuneration. Somewhere in the policy, it refers to the $50 an hour being paid to 6 people. And it's a 13-member committee, but it doesn't specify. I'm just guessing that that payment is meant to the community members. But it doesn't specify that I could find in the policy or the terms of reference that it was community members as opposed to all the members. So I'm just flagging that and hope it can be checked.
Interesting point, Councillor Carver. I think it's something that we can verify with the District of Chester authors. It is my understanding that this would be for the citizen committee members, not for the elected official members.
So the request here is to approve the terms of reference. I think we can always say approve the terms of reference with staff being directed to raise the need for clarification around the public member compensation. I just put that in the motion.
Okay. So I'm very happy that this has, I guess, has come full circle and we have something concrete that's on the table for us. And in many ways, the councils that are showing, from my perspective, some leadership in trying to get this, have a structure to start addressing anti-racism. There's a few concerns sort of I have, and I just want to make them. I am very happy we're here. I think there's a good direction to go, but it's important for us to notice, one, that there was a hired consultant who are people of color who were trying to work on this particular aspect and did not, for a particular reason, their way of working and the way either staff and council work did not match up, and that relationship ended badly. For me, that's very, very instructive as to, not that it's bad people, but just the structures are complicated and challenging when it comes to trying to dismantle systems that have been in place for quite a long time. And so that should be very, very instructive as to whoever will take on this role, what kind of challenge they will have. And not to say that there are bad things that happen, but I think it should be very, very instructive. On the way the TOR has been formulated, basically, if I'm not wrong, you correct me if I'm wrong, CEO, from a spillover from that process, the CEOs got together, I guess, and came up with this as a terms of reference. If I'm not mistaken.
I mean, that's great. It's largely based on the approach taken with the accessibility committee.
And so in many ways, what I would say, that's a system solution to try and rectify itself. And this is a system that has a lot of systemic problems embedded in it. And so what I would have wanted to see in the terms of reference was an opportunity for when those members of public come and join the committee, that they have the ability to look at the terms of reference and actually question, are these terms of reference actually going to get to where we're going? And I'll point out a few things there. So when you look at what the topic talks about, it says it's anti-racism. When you look at risk, the coordinator's title, it talks about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for me, those are very two distinct things and different. And so if we want to do anti-racism work, we actually need to do anti-racism work. If we want to do diversity, equity, and inclusion, that is part of anti-racism work, but it does not encompass everything. And so I think that there needs to be some work around that. The position doesn't talk about it being a designated position.
What position?
A designated position. So in this particular case, if I applied and Kelly applied and Kelly had
Which I'm going to.
better qualifications than I did, Kelly would get that position. And I think you would be going back to systemic problems. And so for me, this needs to be a designated position. And then the final piece is around, there were two committees, one on Lunenburg and one the town of Bridgewater. In this document, it doesn't even talk about what the transition will look like, and maybe those conversations have been had. But so I used to be a member of the Bridgewater committee. If I was still on that committee and I saw this document, I would just say, well, these folks have rubbished all the work I've been doing and have set up this structure. And maybe I'm wrong. There must have been other communications and conversations that have been had with that committee, that would not be the feeling that would be had. So I don't know if I'm making sense.
On that last point, if I can.
Yes.
On that last point, I think it's up to those towns. So I actually have no idea what communications have happened internally,
Okay.
only to say their CAOs and mayors have advanced this. So presumably they have had internal conversations. I would hope so. I mean, we wouldn't have anything to do with them because we don't have a pre-existing committee. On the 2 points about the designation of the position and the committee reviewing the terms of reference, I think they're both absolutely correct points. That's what we did with the accessibility case and worked out, very well. They did review the terms. We did hire someone who was a first voice, so that I think is the intention, but I agree it needs to be reflected somewhere in the documentation. So I'll bring that up. And then I think I was just noticing the point about the $50 thing. So that's only in the budget estimates. It's not actually in the terms of reference. So I don't think we have to worry about correcting it in any motion. Just that I'll raise the need to, but I'm sure that was they were just shorthand because it's just about the budget.
And I can't find that where I spotted that, but I'll
Yeah,
let
it
you
was
know.
in
if
the
I-
budget in Tara's report.
No, it's mentioned there, but it's also mentioned as somewhere else in the document.
Okay, I couldn't find it either.
So I'll look again and I'll find it and I'll let you know where it was.
And then Deputy Mayor, you did make some other points. I don't have a response to the point about the name. I have no idea where the name, the EDI or DDI, when I saw it came up as EDI, I was like, what is EDI? I've never heard that acronym in my life.
Yeah.
But obviously at least one of the units has been using that terminology and it made its way in here. So
Yeah.
point taken. We're not being asked to approve the position description.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that with the others. And I mean, if you want to include anything in a motion, feel free, but I was only looking for a motion on the terms of reference anyway, so.
My assumption is that there will be sort of a revisit to get some feedback from council with that. I would allow for those items to be mentioned in that feedback. Do you want me to move a motion to?
Well, I mean, I'll take it informally, but at the same time, it might be a good idea to put those concerns on the record. That's up to you. I really, I'll do it either way, but in a way, coming from council, saying that these are priorities, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that through council.
Okay.
I think
have-
we should.
yeah.
I did have a question
I
for
have a question.
Mayor
I know something.
Mayor DePin.
No, that's.
Yeah. Councillor Lawrence Croft has a question for the mayor.
Mayor
was the question?
DePin, I'm just wondering, was there any thought to adding someone from the Regional Education Center on this, or a representative that would represent the education of our young people?
it wasn't, I can't recall any discussion where that was suggested, but it certainly becomes a commentary, not unlike what the deputy mayor has just offered in this session, that we can take back to the next meeting of the mayor's deputies and CAOs. Deputy Mayor Kangata is one of the members of that committee. And we can share those concerns that our council has at that time.
I think it would be a very important member of the partnership to have our education system here in Lunenburg, Queens, represented.
Okay, all right.
So
Councillor Bailey.
will the committee members have an opportunity once the committee is struck and it gets up and running, have an opportunity to adjust the terms of reference based on their subject matter expertise and that of the new senior leader that's brought on to run the operation? I assume there'll be an opportunity once it gets struck for that group to make further improvements to the terms of reference.
Yeah, I mean, that's a standard practice.
Okay, so
But that
we're,
being said, there's no harm in including it in a recommendation.
so I guess the point is that while we are supporting the current terms of reference, there's certainly, we're not suggesting that they can't be edited
Yeah.
by the folks on the team in due course, and we're open-minded to that.
And I think that's the value of putting it in the motion, is to say, like, we're not gonna hold it up, but here's some considerations that aren't covered and should be covered.
There is
They're
that
not really
inherent
all about the
flexibility.
reference. They're about the
Okay.
position, they're about, you know.
So as chair, I can't make a motion, can I?
No.
No.
I mean, you can yield your seat to somebody else. and-
I'll yield my seat to Councillor Wilson and make a motion.
There
I
you go,
guess.
you could do, yeah, you could. do
Fair
that.
enough.
I'd like to move that council approve the terms of reference of the Lunenburg. Trying to look for the long title.
Mhm.
Lunenburg County Anti-Racism and Anti-Discrimination Advisory Committee with a few suggestions for consideration and amendment. The first one that when the committee is formulated, that the committee gets a chance or an opportunity to have input in the terms of reference. Secondly, that the Chester district, it's not Chester district, Chester municipality reconsider the title of the coordinator to reflect the work itself, not diversity and equity and inclusion, but rather anti-racism. That Chester considers having this position to be a designated position. And Wanda, I probably did not mention that the committee members have the opportunity to contribute to agenda items for meetings. I did not see that in the terms of reference. And when I look at how our committees are, sometimes committee members don't get that opportunity to do that. So it's good for it to be clear. Yes, that's my motion.
Seconder? Councilor Feeny. On the question, all in favor, by hand. Opposed? Carried.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Any other comments or ready to move on to the next one? And that I'd like to thank staff, CEOs for getting this to this point, and it hasn't been easy.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I mean, Tara deserves certainly the
Yeah.
share of the thanks there.
Yeah. Building and development permit summaries, Councillor Carver, that's you.
Thank you. So recently, two things happened that led me to bring this motion to council. One was having heard from a resident of Long Hill Road that there were some funny little cabins being built down at the curve, and I hadn't noticed them because there are so many trees. So I went and looked and realized that there were some little cabins being built in the woods there. So I sent an email to the planning department, to our planner, asking what it was, and got an answer back, and everybody's seen it, and apparently there are going to be 16, up to 16 little units in 12 small buildings that were described as hotel rooms in the trees. And that they were being built there as of right, and they will be like short-term rentals. And that they were built there as of right. And as a member of council, I felt kind of blindsided by not having known about this and having heard about it kind of informally. And so it made me think that it would be useful, if it's possible, to have information coming from the planning department about building permits and development permits that are being processed in the department. The second one was, I hope this one isn't confidential, might be. It was about, in general, somebody who was applying for a development permit and was running into some hurdles. And I think that I had a sense that there was some sense around this table that, oh, why is that happening? And wanting perhaps to know more about the context. So, given that, I sent a written version of the motion in for the council package, but I realized that it was limited to only permits that had already been issued. But I think it would be interesting to know about it, things that are being processed or not processed. So I've revised that to this, that council directs staff to provide a report on the feasibility of council receiving periodic summaries from the town's planning office regarding building and development permit transactions. So that we would, in theory, if it's possible, hear about applications.
I'll second that.
So moved by Councillor Carver, seconded by Councillor Lawrence Croft on the question. Councillor now.
This will make you saying well, periodically. How often are you thinking that we should get these reports? Because chances are we're still gonna miss something.
Right, but well, I think the idea was that rather than me prescribing the time frame, that staff could explore that with the planners and find out what might be workable. And then we could talk about then what's workable and what we ideally would like. So we'll see.
I have a question around. So I have a concern with the motion around the issue of privacy. If I'm doing a little deck in my backyard, I don't want the whole town to know that I'm doing that. And then
Well,
I have to refresh my memory, but I believe a permit is public record, an application for a permit is not public record.
Yeah.
So that I don't believe that could be shared.
So I mean,
But I will
the nature of
verify.
this is to come back with a report on these questions, so I wasn't engaging with them because that's something we're being given the opportunity to do subsequent to this, so. Yeah, but these are all the things we'd have to look at if this motion were to pass.
my hope is to save the time.
Well, that's fine too.
If we know staff have a lot to do. If we know that it will not get you what you want, there's no need for us to direct staff to go and do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges with those in terms of
Yes.
making anything public. Like, we do have a quarterly update from Chester. It's been a little intermittent, but they've been saying they want to make sure they give it to us, which is reflected in the report to council.
Yeah.
But it's extremely minimal. It just says how many permits were issued.
Yeah.
And that's all it says. I would like them to include the value of the permit, since they include the value of the work. And I was talking about that recently. Could that be disclosed? But even knowing the number of the permits and the value, which is great because we know how it's going to affect the assessment base, which I'd like to know, doesn't deal with any of the innuendos and concerns and questions you guys may receive and rumors that fly around. And yeah, I think it would be very challenging to provide an on the record report for that. But obviously, I would put more thought into how it might be done if this motion were to pass. But I agree with you, we do have a limited amount of
What
time.
I'm hearing is the only thing that we'd be able to get is the permits that are already issued, not the ones that were applied for. We wouldn't know if somebody applied for a permit, we just know once the permit was issued, that this permit was issued. Right?
Yeah, I think it was
Nice,
second.
Good job.
Councillor Phil.
I guess the default would need to be, in my mind, in the absence of a formal report. And with the understanding that that would be unable to be secured, fair enough. At least we could establish a protocol for inquiry to the degree that the town councilor would have a requirement to know something. And to establish an appropriate protocol to make a query and then get a response under whatever umbrellas appropriate. So I don't think it's inappropriate that a town councilor or the mayor will be asked about a 16-unit development on the corner of a busy on Main Street, and the idea that the council was completely oblivious to the project because it was a by right development is maybe that's a fact of life, but it's not surprising that a councilor or the mayor or the CAO would receive an inquiry and need some mechanism to at least become informed, so that if it comes to matter. So in the absence of having a note, so I think Councilor Carver received quite a bit of information through a direct inquiry, but whether that worked well, and it shows that they're very responsive within the planning team. But if we have 12 if we have 7 councilors and the mayor all sending individual emails, that may get a little unruly. So I think we just need to figure out what the plan is amongst ourselves about how that kind of a question will get asked. Just it doesn't anyway.
And I think I share the concern with you around just things happening and your council have no idea about. But I also put myself on the other side, being because I do a lot of development on my piece of land here and there, being the one who's applying for those building permits and stuff like that. How the way I've seen the process work, how do you get that information? I've just come in and talked to Heather. I want to build something in my backyard. Before that permit is issued, you would have that idea. And so there's a push and a pull to this, and I don't know whether this motion will cure your issue, but we can vote on it if you're comfortable as being that.
Well, there's 2 things here. One is we could, I revised the motion. The original motion just simply that I suggested had been simply permits issued, which is public information, but we don't get it automatically. So I have 2 options here. One is to withdraw the motion that I actually made, which referred to transactions. So that would include applications as well as permits that have been issued. So I could just go back to that original motion, or I'll just let this one stand and let the staff sift through it and say this isn't possible, but this is that. Okay, so
What's your preference?
I think I might withdraw this motion and go back to the original one. It's just simpler, perhaps.
The withdrawn, you accept the
I
withdrawal?
do.
And you move the second
Okay,
one?
so I move that council for the town of Mahone Bay direct staff to provide a report on the feasibility of council receiving periodic summaries of building and development permits issued by the town's planners and for the town planning office.
Seconded by Councillor Lawrence Brown. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. 7.4, notice of motion.
That's from me, isn't it? Yes, just the notice of motion that I will be moving at our next council meeting regarding the service and operational standards that we talked about last week and the developing of those. So we're to be coming.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Wilson. Do you have a second after that? Councillor Finney seconds.
That's a notice of motion.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry.
Excuse me.
My apologies. Thank you for reminding me, Councillor Finney. Notice of motion, so we'll have that coming down by the next meeting. Committee reports. First one is 8.1, Nuremberg County Senior Safety Program monthly report.
Yes,
Councillor Lawrence Proud, just speaking to you.
well, you have the report before you, and I'm assuming everyone read it. Are there any questions regarding the report? They're pretty straightforward.
Oh, good.
Yes, they're doing good things, and it's amazing the number of requests they have by a lot of requests. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
And I did ask a couple questions about getting, a feel for services in the different communities that have issues and requests for assistance from the coordinator, and a part-time person is coming on staff. So they're in the process of, it'll be someone who's already employed by the police services in Bridgewater, because they need the access to files and whatnot, so the confidentiality of the work and the facilities where that houses the office needs to be secure. So it'll be one of the already employed, that will be shifted to a part-time position there. But there is a big need for that, for this coordinator to do the work that she gets to do too. So I move that we accept the report as presented for February 2023.
Moved by Councillor Lawrence Proud, seconded by Councillor Carver. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. And the next one is the Community Logo Development Steering Team draft minutes. Of the minutes there, and there's a motion.
There is a motion out of our meeting. The group wished that we engage the public in how we move forward. Seeing that the feeling was there was a lack of public consultation with the last logo initiative. So that the steering team recommends to council that the town conduct a survey to determine whether the town should continue to use the current logo, create a logo based on the three churches, or engage in a public process to develop a new logo with community input.
You're moving it? Seconded by Councillor now on the question.
So I'm a little confused, because I had thought, perhaps mistakenly, that the funding that was provided for the logo, this logo project, I think it was $25,000, would have included that. So that was available to the committee, and I thought that the committee would then be running.
And it may still be spent.
But I thought the committee would be running the survey, not the town.
Well, the committee we needed the council to approve the survey that goes out to residents. So it'll be in the newsletter and there'll be hard copies here. But we need your approval for the questions that were listed. It's on the report.
But yeah, it's just respecting the fact that this is a committee of council, so if the committee's got an idea, they say, council, we're gonna go out and do this. Are you okay with that? That's what's being requested here, is council to say, yes, go out and engage the community. You have our blessing to do that.
So we will be using that money for consultation, and also we may need some branding, the professional services.
Thank you for clarifying that. May I have a supplementary?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first question on the survey asks, are you a resident of the town of Mahone Bay? Are people who are not residents of the town of Mahone Bay encouraged to be part of the survey or to contribute to the survey?
Well, there were members on the committee who are not residents of Mahone Bay, and that was part of the, yeah. So, we do have people who are not on the committee, and so that is something that can be.
I would say that they are eligible to complete the survey, but we just want to distinguish on survey as to who were members of town, residents of the town, and who weren't. Doesn't eliminate their survey from the lot. That was my understanding of it anyway.
So I have a concern, significant concern about the motion. Because I think this question we asked the community, and that's what led us to striking the committee. Oh, sorry, I'll speak up. The current question that's being asked, so I didn't look at the survey, just look at the motion and what it's asking us to do. So the town conduct a survey to determine whether the town should continue to use its current logo and create a logo based on the three churches, or engage in a public process to develop a new logo with the community. We as council tasked this committee to develop, to carry out a public process to develop the logo. We actually tasked the committee to do that. It's in the terms of reference. What I feel this motion takes us back to is what we did before we came to strike up the committee. If I'm not mistaken, that is what we are saying here. So you're going back, you've already asked community members, do we want to revisit this? They said yes, we brought it back, and a whole year plus the community waiting, and then now we're going back to the community to ask the same question. I fundamentally feel that's a huge problem.
Well, if you felt the energy in the room.
Yeah.
At the first meeting, it was a little calmer, the second meeting.
Yeah.
I think we have to earn the trust of the community back, that we are open in this process and we are listening to people. There are very strong opinions around the table that what the logo should be now. But we feel the community should have say in that.
Yeah. So,
And that's why the survey came up, and it gives the community an opportunity to respond.
can I respond to that? So I do not disagree. I know it's a very emotive subject, but I think the question that's being asked is not the right question. The question should be going to the community to say, we are going through a logo processing development process. In fact, in the decision you made, we said we are coming up with a community logo. We had that conversation and said we're coming up with a community logo. We are not using the current logo going forward. So we can go back to all those motions, all those conversations you had. They're all on YouTube, and you will see the narrative of the conversation very well. So I'm sort of wondering, why are we going back again to the community to say, do we want to create or develop a logo? We will not have assigned 25,000 to this committee.
Keep the same logo.
that would have been quite interesting for us to land at that decision. Anyways, Councillor Pini and then Councillor Wilson.
The one virtue of the question, of the survey question, would be it would identify if there's a groundswell of love for the current logo. Maybe people have gotten used to seeing when now I'm calling the Lotus 3 Diamond, the Lotus grocery store 3 Diamond logo. But I mean, it's interesting, like, you know, over time, people, they grow to love things. Maybe the community has grown to love the 3 triangles. I have my doubts, but if they do, at least this would answer that. So, I mean, that would be a virtue of asking the question, does anybody, you know, so we're not sitting back in 6 months and saying, well, I love the old logo. But anyway, I take your point, Deputy Mayor. I think you asked the question in the interest of helping the committee carve out a path to move forward quickly. So fair enough.
The only two comments. One is, I don't think that we presupposed that the diamonds would not be the logo chosen out of this
No, yeah,
process.
yeah.
We did not say
Yeah.
that. But secondly, I think, it seems to me the committee has a clear mandate. They have a bucket of money. And what I want to hear from them next is, this is what the logo is going to look like. And I don't know that this back and forth is particularly productive with council, I mean.
Well, we were advised that this should come to council, the survey.
There was the one, I think, if I remember right, I don't have the terms of reference here. The one stickler we talked about in there was some iteration back conversation was that we needed to have a go ahead on the public engagement process for the logo development. I think it's the term of reference. I don't have the terms of reference.
And this is the start of public engagement.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Right.
and so I understand you're reaching out to the public, and I have no problem with reaching out to the public. It's a question that I have an issue with.
I was thinking maybe this would help, Richard, you might have been going to say the same kind of thing, is just in terms of the discussion, the committee that was there. The first meeting, there was a sort of a direction that came up where members were saying, let's go to hire a branding consultant who will engage as part of the development of options for a logo, who will engage the community in that process. And then at the second meeting, there was and you guys feel free to object to or change this characterization, this is how I remember it. The second meeting, there was a discussion that said, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't need to go to that length. One of the scenarios here is that we're going to engage in a branding process. But another scenario might be there's a solid majority of support in the community around a logo based on the three churches. And there's a totally different process to go out, and it's much more affordable, and ask consultants to provide the imagery. So one of the benefits of the committee is we've got people who work in branding and work in logo development, and they're saying, you can go straight out and do a call for, we'd love to see your logo submissions based on this image of the three churches, and have people whip up all kinds of different logo submissions based on that. From, we want to do branding, which says, what are the elements to be reflected in a logo? How do they boil down? What type of logos might reflect these elements? So the scope of work for a consultant is substantially different. So what the committee, I think, is really trying to determine through the survey is whether that scope of work, the higher level for branding, was necessary. And there was a lot of feeling around the committee that maybe it wasn't, despite that having initially been kind of presumed to be the scope of work that the committee would undertake. So that's my thinking as to why we ended up where we did, is to say, well, wait a minute, before we go and engage a consultant at that scope, maybe we do need to consider if the scope is just, let's look for logos based on the three churches.
And some people thought their reason for being on the committee was not as extensive as going into a whole branding.
I mean,
Again.
We could have taken that budget that we had and spent it totally just on that branding piece. And then we would have still had to have more money to do the design and all that stuff. So we thought, well, let's go to the public. That's where we failed the first time. So let's go to the public now and see what they might want. And it might not be as extensive as what we think it might be. So we can, cut down, then just take that money. If we need to go to somebody to do a design, then we have that money to do that. If we don't, well, we saved ourselves $25,000.
Or part of,
Oh, part up, yes, right.
right? So this will help us gain trust of the community, that we are open to listening to their ideas. And it will be the first part of public consultation. Our table is full of people who have tons of experience, that's their career,
That's what we do.
is branding and graphic design. Three people I know are,
Probably close to half of the.
yeah,
committee.
are professionals in this. So we're getting a lot of, information, but it can be
it can be as extensive as we want it to be, or it can be as simple, a much simpler process.
I think in conclusion, Deputy Mayor, like, I think we want to empower the committee to move this agenda forward, so I'd be reticent to really manage the approach. I think, I'm certainly willing to support moving forward with the survey tonight. If this is if this is how the committee wants to proceed, fair enough.
Councillor Wilson?
We don't have a motion on the floor, do we?
We do.
I think.
I made
Yeah.
a motion.
Is it this motion?
Yes.
And Richard
Yeah.
seconded.
Yeah,
Can I just suggest one amendment that we change the word town to committee?
Sounds good.
It would be steering team if,
Steering committee,
Steering.
if you prefer.
not looking at the motion, but I'm just, that's what we call
Oh, wrong one.
That the steering
Committee conduct a survey.
survey, yes.
so,
Yeah.
as we move to vote, I will just register my concern that we are going back to the community with the same question. I do support the committee having the autonomy. In fact, if we can go back, I think I was the one who was very insistent that the committee had the autonomy. But this is going back to the community with the same question, and I find that difficult to support. So it's not that
But when did it come out to the community?
we did.
When?
Instruct the committee.
Before we struck the committee, before we put together the terms of reference, there was a question that went out. There was a survey that, I can't remember how exactly it was done. There was a survey that went out to the community to ask a question around what they feel about the current logo.
No, I mean, we didn't, someone else did one and submitted the results to us as a petition. I actually can't remember that we did one.
Well, we had hundreds of letters and emails
Yes, yeah.
that we responded to, which basically said, we want the logo issue revisited. Struck the committee with the intention to revisit it, but the theme was that inevitably the current logo would be replaced by the logo that the new committee found most appropriate
Yes.
and recommended to council.
Yeah.
And so they might recommend one or two or three different, and council may help be the final decision makers around the final choice. But the expectation is that the logo will change. If this survey does come back and it's 90% in support of maintaining the new logo, we would all be surprised, but I guess it would be worth knowing, that would be worth knowing. Then we would truly be, that would be really eye-opening if that was the case. So it's probably a moot point.
Councillor Calvin, then I guess we vote.
Please.
Yes, I'm the last person, and I think some people have spoken more than they're allowed to two times.
Oh, that would be a shock.
Hmm.
Well, I think we do try to observe that protocol after a motion has been made, discussion on the motion. So I haven't yet spoken on the motion. So this is what I have to say, is that I agree that the questions are somewhat problematic in that they're sort of leading questions. And I do absolutely support the idea that we need to lend our support to the committee. And that it will all work itself out somehow. So I will support the motion.
Okay, we ready to vote
Mhm.
on the question? All in favor?
Wait, I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry,
Jeff.
sorry.
And I have not spoken yet, Councillor Carver. Thank you for making that point.
My apologies, Mayor. Go ahead.
My concern with the way that we've worded the question is to say, do you want to keep the motion we got now? Do you want one based on three churches or something else? And for this group, not council, but for the committee group to make the decision without having talked to the citizens is exactly what the citizens were concerned about that council had done 2 years ago. when they chose one of the options that were presented by the logo designer. And now, so the 7 people around the table made the decision based on the advice we got and what we saw as the most appropriate way to do it. The citizens were rightfully upset that they were not consulted in advance. And now we're going to do the same thing all over again. Just we're going to have a different 7 people making the decision.
No, because we don't even have a logo design. Yeah, we don't even know whether we will keep the old one or move along and have a totally new design. This survey will help us move forward in our next part of the journey. So we don't even know what the logo is, but this is just the first part of public consultation. When we get draft designs, there will be lots of opportunity for public input.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood. Could you reread the motion, please?
Sure. That the committee steering committee conduct a survey to determine whether the town should continue to use its current logo, create a logo based on the 3 churches, or engage in a public process to develop a new logo with community input. So it was an overwhelming, everyone around the table wanted 3 churches. That was clear in the whole room. There was no exceptions. So that's why you have create a logo based on the 3 churches, because we discussed the one that the town was using before was actually the one that belonged to the chamber. And there have since been different versions of that same basic one, but that we don't own the rights, the town does not own the rights to that logo. And so but it was a clear message from everyone around that table about 3 churches. That was a very strong, but that may not be the voice of the population and the community who replied to the survey.
And the survey is designed to ascertain that?
We will take the results of the survey and go from that.
Okay, thank you.
We're just about to vote, Mayor, but I have a question.
Sure.
I've just, like I said before, I didn't look at the survey because I didn't feel that we should go and do a survey. And since I can see folks are saying the survey might go through. So this survey asks, how long have you lived in Mahone Bay?
I can't see the survey. I think
I'll open it up here. The last, I think it's on the 5th question. It says,
It does say that.
how long have you lived in Mahone Bay? Less than 1 year, 1 to 3 years, 4 to 10 years, 10 to 20 years, 20 plus years.
I think
Very bad question
there was
in this context.
I think what the suggestion around the table was, that we want to know who our audience is. And we really want all age groups to participate, and I think people wanted a clearer picture of who's responding.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
so
this is really a question for staff, because we were asked to come up with demographic questions that would be meaningful for interpretation of the results. And we didn't feel that income levels or gender or race or religion were relevant demographic questions to ask.
Yeah.
So the relevant demographic questions that were left over at that point were essentially these ones. We could ask no demographic questions, but the committee had asked for demographic questions, and then the question becomes, are you just insulting people by asking them to tell you their gender on and if you feel this is one of those questions that really doesn't need to be asked, I guess we just don't have a lot of demographic questions left to ask. But that's fine on staff's perspective. We just had to come up with some, and I honestly feel this is a relevant one most of the time. But if council doesn't feel it's relevant, then why ask?
I'm actually, I don't know how to respond to that question. It's an interesting one. I'd like to advise council a little bit on this, that we approach this with the same amount of careful thought that will avoid us getting into more problems going forward. So anyways, we're ready to vote. And I don't want to overly influence that process. Let's vote, but I don't think this is the direction we should be taking. Yeah, and one thing that's maybe a point of clarification, has the committee seen the survey?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
they formatted it at our last meeting.
This is my second time to speak on the motion.
Yeah.
Surveys and questionnaires. There's a science. People go to university to study how to do them. We're not doing that. This is a sort of trial and error. I think that I have arrived at the point of just live with it, see what happens. I have all the same questions that the deputy mayor has referred to. But I don't think we're going to solve it by picking away at it.
See you.
So I'm going to say what I've said many times, and you've probably heard me say it many times, as somebody who actually does have a master's education in stats and surveying and has worked in surveying. Mahone Bay's population is too small to conduct a statistically significant survey. So we have two options. We either have a not statistically significant survey, or we speak with every member of the community. There is no other option. And I think every time we come back to like, couldn't we just do a statistically significant survey? I'm always going to have to point out that that's not possible at this size. And that's just a constraint that we are. But I understand the point. It does mean that whatever we get doesn't have the weight of a statistic. And so why are we asking if we're not going to get that? But I just think it's important to point out we didn't have the option of, and the committee talked about this too. Could we do something to make it statistically significant? And there just isn't an option to do that in town with such a small population.
You know, what people want the whole family, you know, some of the members said, you know, whole families should be, you know, voting on this. Not just the adults in a family and.
We want to get more to school age children involved, you know, nothing saying that. From little toddler up to the adults in the household and build this out and give their own opinions. Anyway, let's see
On the
what's
question.
happening.
It's just, it's
Call the
painful.
question.
It's just
Yeah, I
painful.
call the question on the question.
You can't call it, but.
No, yeah.
Question.
The mayor's called for that question, fair enough.
Are we ready to vote?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, for, in favor? I'm opposed.
Me too.
Motion carried, yeah. Oakland Watershed Advisory Committee.
Dig a little on this. We met, didn't have as productive a meeting as we had, we didn't have anybody there from the province to answer some of our questions. But we did get some planning updates from MODL with regard to what their watershed policy is going to be. And Scott Hoyt, the manager of the water wastewater management system manager, he received a request from the Martins River Fire Department for to use Oakland Lake as a water source in case of a major fire. I had some concerns on that because I think but Scott didn't seem to think it was a problem. But I thought you had to be so far away from the input in order to put anything into that. And also with regard to a truck or anything going in there. And I made the point of saying that, you know, if we go ahead with this motion, I think it has to be fire services, not just Martins River, because right now Mahone Bay doesn't even have that access. So
I think that's how the motion is based, Richard.
pardon? Yeah. So anyway, I'll move that the committee is recommending that council direct staff to prepare a report on the potential for the provision of access to Oakland Lake for fire services.
We have a second,
Second.
Councilor Wilson, second. On the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Heritage Advisory Committee minutes.
Have a few things, Deputy Mayor, at our last meeting. Lots of activity there with a full quorum. And Kelly's trying to keep us on the straight and narrow. We had a request for an alteration to the street facing facade of St. James Church from Jenny Sanderson. The package includes drawings and the design of which was reviewed over 2 meetings by the council. I think as you can see from the drawings, they're very complementary of the historical design. They kind of encapsulate the original church architecture, church being Small C Church, the original architect. It brings together on the front facade the similar arch that you see along the in behind the church where the organ is located. So when we originally received the package, it was just the overhead and it looked like a big square box. And I was a little upset about it, but in the fullness of time with the architectural drawing, it looks very elegant and it received the complete support of the HAC. And therefore, we'd have a motion to support that. And I'd start with making a recommendation, or pardon me, a motion that council approve St. James Anglican Church's request to alter their property that's located at 63 Edgewater Street as outlined in the package.
Moved by Councilor Finney,
I'll second that.
seconded by Councilor Carver. On the question?
So, just a quick question.
Sure.
So the addition is on the side facing Bob Morse's?
Facing the parking lot. The
So straight
front
up front.
facade, you can see the third, keep going down, Richard, two more drawings, 3 more drawings. There you go, that one there. That's the front facade with an extended door. And so the alteration is being requested so that they can install an accessible washroom inside the church. And so this isn't going to happen this summer. It's going to take, fundraising, and they have to figure out, plumbing and water. But I mean, this is probably something that's at least a summer away. But as far as the exterior design, which is the purview of the HAC and council, of course, that's specifically what they're requesting today.
So in this picture of the front, it's going right on the front of it?
It's
Where the
just,
steps are?
you
Or
can
off
see
the
this,
side?
you can see the slope in the previous slide, Richard, if you go back one slide. All they're really doing is extending towards Bob Morse's property.
That's what I thought.
And then having a similar sloping roof line that kind of mirrors the other slope that's on the other side of the church.
That's what I was thinking.
Very-
Picture on us.
Looks like a beautiful piece of carpentry, but very expensive. I'm sure very expensive too. We okay with that one?
Yeah, on the question? All in favor? Motion's carried.
The second item is our ongoing pursuit of and promotion of the municipal heritage designation for various buildings in town. This year, and really based on Kelly reaching out to Angus across the street, 496 Main Street, we were very pleased to see that we can move along with that recommendation. And in due course, you'll see the recognition of the 496 Main Street. The statement of significance is in the package for your perusal, and I think it's a nice complementary building to the overall portfolio, which I believe is 20 now. I think we're up to 20 or 21 buildings in town, somewhere in that range. So I would move that the council register the property located at 496 Main Street as a municipal heritage property.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor
That's where
Carver.
the physiotherapy.
No,
Right here.
This is,
Oh, just a little above,
yeah,
above,
Angus is how, and
Little
across the
Crestwood,
street.
not Bob's, no,
Yeah.
The green one,
with the roses on it.
yes. Like every second house in town was originally the Lotus property. At one point, along with most of the rest of Main Street.
where
On the
was
west.
all this property, so.
On the
Yeah,
question,
you bought one.
all in favor, motion's carried.
And finally, after many years and many discussions and several lawyers, we're finally able to re-register or register formally the Mahone Bay Center, 45 School Street. And very appreciative that the Board of Directors of NBC has moved this along. Again, as you know, the Mahone Bay Center has the plaque already on the wall. But the legal work has never really been ratified, but this will get us on the road to having the last of those odds and ends cleaned up. So finally, I moved the council register the property located at 45 Main Street as a municipal heritage property. Of course, that is the old Mahone Bay School.
So moved.
Oh, pardon me, Mahone Bay School Street, although in the motion it says 45 Main Street. Good catch, Councilor, now, as amended.
Moved by Councillor.
Does it, man?
Second by Councillor Carver as amended. On the question, all in favor?
We'll have somebody on 45 Main Street.
Motion's carried. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah,
I made this application when I was on the board. You interviewed me.
The original.
Way back when I was
The
on the
original.
board of the Mahone Bay Center, and it has not been registered all this time.
and come full circle.
Human error, somewhere along the way.
Okay, moving on.
Excellent, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think that's everything.
Yeah, thank you very much. Lots of business there. Last one is remote meeting.
Meeting was opened and closed in 30 minutes. Actually, I think it was 29 minutes. It was one of the best ones we ever had. Very straightforward and very precise. Done. Anyone have any questions?
No.
No?
Take
Proceed.
longer to answer the questions than the meeting took.
I would move that we accept this minutes as for information.
Councillor now moves, seconded by Councillor Lonis Prop. On the question, all in favor, motion's carried. Since we do not have any new business, are there any questions?
Let's see. There is one question. May I ask why the original logo needed to be changed? Is that the three
Deputy
churches
Mayor?
one?
Very good question.
Yeah. The last one,
Yeah.
previous to our current logo, I'm assuming is.
We did know
That's-
that, right?
That's the original answer. It was never our logo. We never owned it.
Yeah, we never had a logo in the first place that was originally endorsed by council, and council came up with a logo that the community had issues around the process, and so now we want to engage the community in the process that they're involved in, and so there's an opportunity for them to have a say. Okay, well, thank you folks at home. I forget how to run a meeting. Just
that?
tell you go home.
You just need to
hit
hammer.
the gavel. Motion to adjourn.
See you tomorrow.
No?
Well,
We've done the
apparently we
motion,
still do
okay.
because we haven't changed the council
Okay.
policy yet. So I-
Move by Councillor Carver, seconded by